Welcome to this episode of Tell Me More. We're unpacking the sermon on Colossians. We're reflecting on Mother's Day and having a good conversation about the nature of Scripture, the nature of love, and we're glad you're here. Welcome back to the studio. We're gonna do it. We're gonna record a podcast.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, full transparency. Today is Wednesday afternoon, and it is our second attempt at the Tell Me More podcast this week because we recorded a really good episode on Monday.
We did. It was so good. Maybe the best one we've ever done.
I have to think it was.
It was.
However, my mic was loose and therefore not picking up any sound, and so it was a one-man show.
Yeah.
A one-sided conversation, and
which we should have just tried to see how it sounded.
I mean,
I don't know.
We can't know.
Okay.
Lost in antiquity.
They've already erased it. You've already erased it.
We're recording
Addison?
over it in
it's
this
over?
moment.
Oh man.
Addison says yes. And if you're watching, you already see it. If you're listening, though, you realize it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
It's just Dr. Wiles and Katy.
Is this the first time we've ever had a loose microphone? I mean, I don't know.
I just tried to pray in Pastor's Bible study, as I do every Wednesday. And no one could hear me, which one, it's an old crowd, due respect. But
Whoa, seasoned.
No, the mic really wasn't working, so I just yelled at him. I just held the mic lower and yelled. No, but Luke's not here. There's an empty seat, and there was an empty seat Monday when we tried to record this, and there's an empty seat today. Different things in Luke's. He's here. He's in town. He's working hard, but I think he's at a kindergarten award ceremony today or something like that.
That's right.
So we're going to try again.
Here we go.
To see if we can pull off the OG Tell Me More D-Dub and Katy show starting now.
Right. Happy Mother's Day, by the way.
Oh, gosh, yeah. It feels like a lifetime ago now.
It was. It was Mother's Day, and it was sweet. It was awesome.
I joked in here, I don't know if I did it on the podcast or not, but someone asked me if it was my first Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Is this your first Mother's Day? And I was like, oh, I just feel like the church knows me so well.
3 children that are 2 years old, actually.
Yes, and my triplet pregnancy was anything but private or secret, and so it was quite conspicuous.
We gave regular updates on the podcast about you. Katy has just moved to room 104 at Medical City, in case you're wondering where she is. I mean, we had regular updates on the podcast.
Let's go back to Mother's Day, the OG Mother's Day when I had the kids. I've never changed my legal name when I got married. So if you go to a hospital and look for Katy Hodges, there is no. Katy is not my legal first name.
I was about to say, you're a Mary Kathleen.
I am. And so, that's my legal name. I don't think I can get in any trouble for this. Like, y'all can't take this anyway. But my legal name is Mary Reed, Mary Kathleen Reed. I've always gone by Katy. My parents named me that. And when we got married, honestly, I was older, 33. Yeah. My house was in my name. My car was in my name. My accounts were in my name, and I was like, this is going to take a while. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it right now. And so it turns out 6 years later, I still have never done it. And I don't know. We'll see. I just have no real incentive to go spend all day at the Social Security office or whatever that would entail.
Is it okay for us to still call you Katy Hodges?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Socially, I'm very much Katy Hodges.
Yeah, awesome.
But when some people tried to come visit me at the hospital, when they found out I was in the hospital, I had the kids, and they literally struck out. They were like, the security guy with the computer was like, there is no Katy Hodges in this hospital.
Yes, there is.
And later I realized they had tried. And so that can either be good or bad. Right, for me.
I like it.
Depending on who the visitor was, it may have been a favor or not, but...
But by the way, happy Mother's Day,
Thank you. I'll take it. I love being a mom. Yes, I love my kids.
You're a great mom.
I'm very grateful for
it. We love
it.
watching you as a mom.
I love being a mom. I really do. I love...
Times 3.
I love parenthood. I have a good partner. I have cool kids.
You guys are awesome.
Healthy.
They're so cute.
Growing. They just grow so much. It's so fun right now. 2 is super fun. I don't know. I'm guessing every year will be fun, but I actually don't know. The teen years get a mixed review from my friends. One of my
some years are fun.
One of my closest mentor friends is Tiffany Harris. I don't know if we ever talked about Tiffany in here, but Tiffany, I worked for her at a church while I was in seminary, and she just took all the time in the world to invest in me and have me over, and I still just think very, very highly of Tiffany. Yes. She's the associate pastor of community life at Dayspring Baptist Church.
Not congregational.
I know,
life.
Isn't that funny? We kind of ended up in the same camp, but her kids are now either done with school or finishing Baylor. I think their youngest is at Baylor. When they left the house, especially the girls, she's like, I just need to tell you, we hated every year of the teenage years. We are so glad to be done with this. And now they're married and
the Lord gives you the teenage years so you'll feel good about letting your children move out of the house. That's what happens.
I think about, speaking of Mother's Day, I think about my teenage years, and I'm very grateful for Katy Reed and her utmost patience.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a great mom.
I have a terrific mom.
You do.
I have a great model. I'm really lucky.
do.
I have a great mom who, and I praised her in a long way in the last podcast. And I guess the succinct version of that is what you want a mom to be. Like, I mean, almost the things you take for granted: sacrificial, steady, stable, present, all of it. Just not a lot of missteps in Katy Reed. Just predictable in the most honoring ways. Just love her.
Which is great.
But I also have heard from a lot of people that the in-law situation can be fraught.
Can be dicey.
It can be, and I've watched it play out with friends. I'm very lucky in that way too. I've got a great mother-in-law. Ryan has a great mom, and that is a real gift.
Great.
That's a real gift. Yeah, she's been, and she's a very present grandmother as well. Both of them are, but she's closer physically.
Yeah.
She's only like 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
So we get to see, and her grandma name, she's like, I'm not going to do that. They can call me Christy, which is her name, which makes, if you know her, because she's a retired ADA, Associate District Attorney, Assistant District Attorney. So she's very no nonsense. And she's like, I don't need a grandma name. They can just call me Christy. And I was like, all right.
I like it.
I love it. So they're like, Christy, can we go see Christy? And I'm like, I feel so disrespectful. But yeah, sure. But can you call me
Meanwhile,
Mom?
you're still calling her Miss Hodges.
You know, no, she never changed her name when she got married, which is exactly what you would think. Yeah. She got married to Mr. Hodges.
So there just is not a Mrs. Hodges anywhere in this whole equation. I've discovered an incredible vacuum.
Yes. And she professionally, though, and the same thing, I think she was a lawyer and had a professional career and a professional reputation, and she never changed her name.
Yeah.
Even socially. She's like, she said, I did for 2 weeks and didn't feel good, so I'm Christy Drake. Yeah, her last name's Drake. So happy Mother's Day to all the strong women.
Yes.
Yeah, and that is why we joke, but it's true. Ryan has no problem being married to a strong woman because he was raised by one.
Awesome.
You know, there's no, God had prepared the way for me and him because there's no.
That's great.
Yeah. So,
well, you know,
anyway.
not only Happy Mother's Day, but great job in helping plan Mother's Day for everybody else at our church.
I am so happy that
we had. Sweet.
That was a great team effort, truly. Like Michael Glenn asked me he did ask me, Katy, what do you think we should do for Mother's Day? It's one of those, like, we don't want to miss a moment to be able to give a gift or do whatever.
Sure.
So Michael was the one that kind of kicked it off the hill. And he said, rather you think that through as a woman, which is just very thoughtful of him. And so I gathered all the women on the ministry side at a certain, associates, all the ministers, quote unquote, of women.
Right.
So Chelsea, Tiffany, Casey, Phyllis, Erica, me and Ashley, and Shelby from down here, the graphic design. And I just said, hey, what do we do? Mother's Day can be fraught.
Yep.
And pretty quickly it just emerged. Like Ashley had this great vision of planting a bulb instead of giving like a cut flower, planting a bulb that would, and all the imagery, right, that comes with watching something be. But that was Ashley, and I think she had held on to that image for a while. And how do we use it? And how does it create like a beacon of hope for our church? So that was all Ashley. Chelsea really thought through the wording. Just how do you thoughtfully convey this huge? Because we're trying to encompass so much, right? Basically saying like Mother's Day can be difficult. We don't need to name every reason, but we need to encapsulate it.
Right.
And also, this is for everyone. You don't want to name every situation out there, but you want to encapsulate it.
Exactly.
So Chelsea did a great job with that. And then, of course, Shelby designing it.
I was going to say, and Jen. Without minimizing mothers on Mother's Day. That was what I loved about it. You could still celebrate mothers without understanding that we have contextualized the day with something hopeful. That's what I loved about it.
I think that's the ticket, because we're like, we can't, Mother's Day is not a service of lament.
Right. That's right.
I mean, but it can feel like that for some people.
Right.
And we talked about.
Because you have all those moms up there and dads dedicating their children.
Yes.
I mean, we have 13 of them Sunday.
So you see the fruit of so much joy. You see the children's choir, so much life, so much beauty. You see the solo or the duet, I guess, so Michael Glenn and his mom. Like the things that are
unbelievable.
And so the evident parts of Mother's Day are on display, but what you don't see is like that line of women dedicating their children and men. You don't know what fertility journey they've been on.
That's right.
You don't think about that 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage somewhere along the way. Like you don't see that in that bundle of joy, but a lot of people know it, and and that's the first thing they think of when they see these babies that didn't get dedicated.
That's right.
And so,
and there were people at church Sunday.
This was their
first Mother's Day without their own moms. So it has all kind of emotions tied in. So
and
we struck a great balance.
Yeah, I'm just really thankful to have that and that team of women.
And we could celebrate it.
Well, that's the thing,
what I
because
loved.
it's not, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can be the church, the family of God together.
Yeah.
And you don't have to pretend like everything's great when you walk into First Baptist Arlington, ever.
And on
right?
Father's Day, we'll just say, hey, happy Father's Day. Okay, good.
You know,
Thank you.
I did put the ball back in Michael Glenn's court. I said, Michael, thank you. This was so successful and good. Can you carry Father's Day?
Yeah.
And we all joked that it was like, yeah, what tea time do dads
I
want?
was going to say, we'll get them golf clubs, fishing poles, what are we going to barbecue
I know,
grills.
and that's so stereotypical.
Green eggs.
It's so stereotypical. But it is, if you're just describing my husband, you've named, not the fishing pole part, but everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like smoked meat and golf would be the best.
You
And
got
in
it.
fact, I told him, I guess on Mother's Day when it was kind of over, which he had given me like a nice quiet day to myself on Friday, which was a real gift and a really much, because he knows Sunday, as much as we want to try to make it, it's just a chaotic day.
It's a day.
So he did well, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Ryan. But I was like, I was just thinking I would let you go golf. And you can either do it on Sunday, actual Father's Day, or do you want to do it on Saturday, and then you could be present, whatever. And he was like, oh, yeah, either way is great. That's fine. Like, that was it, And he was like, well, maybe I'll do 9 holes, and then we could, and I was like, go eat barbecue? And he was like, yeah. So, like, you've named exactly what he would want.
awesome.
So it's just different, and men and women are different, and we try to, it's one thing I appreciate about our church. We're trying to figure out in this current reality, like how do you uphold these differences in gender and celebrate them while also kind of promoting an egalitarian leadership model. It's just a unique, not everyone is doing that well right now.
But it turns out you can do it.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
not
I
be
hope
weird
so.
about it.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. And we did it. And I loved it. It was
Yeah.
great.
So-
And we had, almost all of those little bags of bulbs of flowers.
Oh, yeah, that was the great thing. We packed, and the whole staff did that, and I appreciate that so much because it was a little bit tedious. It could have been. So we packed 1,000 bags. So we had 3,000
3,000
bulbs.
flower bulbs, yeah.
Yeah, we did. We got boxes of thousands. Yeah. And we had, I don't know, Jen and I cleaned up on Monday, and it was, I said 40 were left. And who knows how many people took, when they saw it getting empty, took a few for their garden or whatever. But I think the point is,
For a friend. That's what we did. And for your daughter.
and that was
or-
the invitation, right?
That's what we did.
And I guess, if y'all want some and didn't get them, either email me. We could come by the church. I'll find some that still haven't gotten given out, if that's something. But I saw a lot of people take more than one, which was exactly the point.
That's right.
Give them to your, even I was walking in trying to contextualize this for the greeters on Sunday. Hey, don't feel like you have to decide who's a mom coming in and hand them these.
Yeah.
We're going to tell them in the service what to do. Anyone can take them, men, women, moms, not. And every greeter or person listening was like, oh, that's so good, because my niece or my kid or, I was da-da-da-da, or, my nephew just lost his mom. It's just everywhere. So all that to say, I've talked about it too long, but
Good job. No,
it's
I
good
thought it
for a
was
church
great.
to be thoughtful.
It was great.
And
it was
can,
awesome.
and God can use all that. So, and does.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And this podcast is brought to you by First Baptist Arlington.
Do-do-do-do-do.
Right? And, we got camps coming up.
Oh my
and
gosh. Camp is coming like freight train.
High school graduation party. Celebration
Turns
for
out
high school
camp and
grads
high
this
school
coming
graduation
Sunday.
is pretty much the same day as we
Yes,
talked
that's
about.
right.
So
Yep.
always kids come back and forth for that. So
We'll do the high school grads this year.
I do
this coming
want to.
Sunday.
Yeah, this coming Sunday is High School Grad Sunday, which is always sweet at our church. Little parade of graduates. Sign the Bibles if you get a chance. Those are out until the service starts. So
That's right.
the other thing I would say is this summer, our children's ministry and youth ministry is working hard and has worked hard to plan a really meaningful and thoughtful summer, including camps, overnight camps, day camps, mission trips.
Kinder Bible School.
Yeah,
mission
kinder Bibles
trips.
for 4s and 5s. I mean, young kids,
Wow camp.
all of it. And so
A lot of them.
if
Sports
you,
camps. Right? There's some kind of
yeah,
sports,
we're trying a new.
sports
We're trying
camps.
a new Triumph
Something
sports
different.
camps. So it's Triumph as an organization. It's kind of a third-party camp that we're letting use our space, but also capitalizing on. We want our people to do it, but to be honest, we don't have to come up with all of the ideas, the manpower, the equipment, all of it. So Triumph Sports Camps is hosting 2 camps at our church. One is for younger kids and one is for older kids. And so you can find all that on our website. And I was trying to find youth camp earlier. It's pretty easy to navigate if you go to ministries and then either children or youth, and their pages are pretty set up to tell you everything. But I would just encourage you, as if you're a parent with kids at home or a grandparent that has influence over kids, sign them up for some of this. Not, I say make them go. You can't make them go, but you can, well, depending on
Some
the
of them
age.
you can.
You can highly suggest that this is how they're going to spend their time. Yeah, you tell me if you can make a 16-year-old go to camp, but you can make an 8-year-old
That's right.
go to a day camp.
That's right.
And I just think downtime is good, but a measured amount of downtime is good.
Yep.
They need to be socialized.
That's
They
right.
need to be
There's a lot happening.
interacting with the world and being, God is in all of this. That's what we trust and hope and why we plan it. And so we just really want them to have a meaningful summer of growth. And I think that our education ministry has planned that, and I'd hate for you to miss it.
Yep. It's really good. Really good.
Yes.
So, yeah, awesome.
I'm excited. You know what else I'm excited about? Your sermon on Sunday.
Yeah, me too.
Colossians.
The one coming up. Oh, you mean this past Sunday?
Both. I'm just in the middle of, I'm really between two giants right
You
now.
are right now.
I'm-
What has,
last Sunday
what
and
has
this
already
Sunday,
happened
just to
and
be
what is
clear.
yet to come.
Yeah,
Man,
I
you're just
feel-
caught in the middle, right?
Patrick Mitchell, who we'll talk about in a minute, calls it the overlap of the ages,
Yes,
the present
yes,
evil age and the
yes.
age to come.
Yes, I like
feel
it.
like I am living in
Yes,
the Venn diagram is overlapping
are,
between
you
the
are.
glory of last Sunday and what is yet to come this
What we're
Sunday.
anticipating. That's right.
It's big. I can hardly do my job this week. No, I'm doing fine. But I do want to talk about last Sunday before we point to this Sunday.
Yeah.
And so it was Mother's Day, but
It was.
really you talked about the love of God.
That's right.
It's somewhat reflected in Mothers, but really it was about this really deep, thoughtful passage in Colossians, which turns out all of Colossians is deep and thoughtful.
It is.
It's so good. If y'all haven't read in a while, it's the daily Bible reading. It's
powerful.
I spent a lot of time with it last week. It was just the language and the vocabulary used in Colossians is just terrific.
And to think that Paul was in
Yeah, tell us.
in jail.
Okay, let's take
when he wrote it.
take a step back. Not just the text, but the context. So, what world was this coming out of? What was Paul trying to address when he was writing it?
Yeah, so Paul is probably 80, 60 or so, we would say, we think. He makes it to Rome as a prisoner under house arrest for a couple of years. Most scholars think that he was then released and then was recaptured a few years later and then martyred there in Rome. So this was the first imprisonment in Rome. And he was accompanied by people like Luke and John Mark, and there were others who were there with him. And he just felt led. He had already begun a letter writing ministry prior to this, which is somewhat fascinating if you think about it for that era. But we're grateful that he
Would that have been unusual?
No, there were there was a lot of correspondence in those days. But for someone to be as I guess theologically astute as Paul, and receive the inspiration of the Spirit of God, and to really help us codify much of what we know about Christian theology. I mean, he is that person for us. So it's pretty powerful that he was able to do that in letters. In other words, he didn't do that it's not like he sat down and wrote a book or a play. He actually did all this in correspondence. So he did it in community with the church, if you will. So
And
that's what makes it.
and these letters are real letters.
They are.
That
So
were
that's
ma-
what
that were-
makes. I
I
think
say
it's what makes it
mailed.
endearing.
I mean, they weren't postage stamp,
Yeah,
but
right.
but they were
But they were
carried
delivered. That's right, hand delivered,
to
yeah.
other people. Yeah,
And,
they're functional in that
Exactly.
nature. Yeah.
And so this one in particular, when you get to the end of Colossians, he signs this one with his own hand, because those days they used what was called an amanuensis,
Right. And I was going to,
a secretary or a
as
transcriber.
When I was with Todd Still, 18 years ago in seminary, not really 18, but it feels like a while, 12, something like that. We learned that some of the Pauline letters, there's disputed authorship.
Yeah, that's right.
Even if it's what we would like read through and say, yeah, Paul wrote this.
yeah,
But
that's right.
because of vocabulary usage
that's right.
but
Right.
in the end of this one, he says basically like, this is my
I
signature.
signed this with my own hand.
Yeah.
And so
Hard to dispute that, would you say?
I would.
Okay. Would all the other New Testament scholars?
I think
Some
this
people
one,
pick it apart, which I know you
of
have.
course.
You have problem with that.
Yeah,
but
yeah. This one here, I think, is pretty well believed. Connects us also to Philemon, because in Philemon he talks about Onesimus, and Onesimus is mentioned in this letter.
Same Onesimus.
And so, but yeah, Colossians is one of those majestic letters from Paul, because it's him addressing a potential error in the church in Colossae to deny just this high Christology, and to somehow act as if there was this superior knowledge that was available to people, perhaps.
And he's trying to write into that,
Right.
And clarify it.
And make sure that the incarnation is really where we find the knowledge of God on display. And so it's the book of Colossians to me it really is about the superiority of Christ and just this incredible Christology, but also he has this really dense text on Christian behavior and our response to who Christ is. This is how you're supposed to live, how your character's transformed by what Christ has done for you, and then how that's lived out in virtuous living. And so that's why I mentioned Sunday morning, we're studying character and virtue during the spring. It's one of the domains in the human flourishing study that the Global Flourishing Studies engaged in. And when you look at New Testament passages on virtue, Colossians 3 is usually what many New Testament theologians would point you to, because there's so much in Colossians 3. So we're actually
So
going
it's
to
not
spend,
just by incidents that we landed in Colossians 3. You're trying to teach us something here.
Right. So for the next 3 weeks, this past week, the next 2 weeks, we're going to stay in this one text because there's just so much there. But just this collection of wisdom from Paul is really what we're trying to embrace here, I guess is what I'd say. And so, the imagery, there's baptismal imagery at the beginning, Colossians 3, this idea that you've been raised up now, that because I would say that the forces of this world are at work in our lives to try to convince us nothing has changed when you become a Christian. There's really nothing new. Whereas the teachings of the gospel is actually everything has changed. Paul will tell us in 2 Corinthians 5, if you're in Christ, then everything's been made new. You can't say that nothing has changed.
Do you think that was true then and true now?
Yes.
Or do you think it's even more true now? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's writing into that same moment then.
Yes. I think that's the message of the gospel, that everything has changed and you have been elevated now. You've been raised into this spiritual consciousness.
But if you're not careful, you can actually think it's just same old, same
It's just
old.
not, no big deal. Go back to your old way of life. That imagery of that N.T. Wright uses about the age to come is like the waves crashing on the shore. The present evil age is the undertow just pulling you back into that old way of life. Well, that's a very powerful image to me, because that undertow is it's real.
Yeah.
And since
it's dangerous.
we know
that. Yeah.
Yeah, like growing up in Alabama, always going to Florida for vacation, you had to learn. You could even look. Sometimes if you're in depending on
how
if you're in
high
a
up you
hotel
are,
room, and if you look, you can actually see it.
Yeah.
And typically what they'll do in Florida is they'll put up like a big red flag to just say, this part of the beach, you need to swim somewhere else.
Yeah, these aren't just like currents in different directions.
No.
One is very dangerous
It's
for you.
very dangerous.
Right.
It can suck you under, and you try to fight against it, and you don't realize, unless you try to fight against it, how powerful it is. So they usually caution you, don't fight it. Just swim down the beach, and so we taught our kids that when they were growing up. Look, if you ever get scared, if something like this happens, don't swim into shore, swim down the shore, because eventually you get out of it, and then there is no undertow hardly. It's just very mild.
Right.
But Paul,
the metaphor breaks down for in here. Yeah. We wouldn't. If you're feeling caught up in sin, don't just let it carry you away.
That's right. Yeah.
Seek help.
This is different. Yeah, of course.
We can help you.
But the point is, it's very powerful.
But it is, and more than you think.
Yes, the old way of life, and Paul kind of describes some of that. Basically says, well, because you've been elevated now, you've been seated in this heavenly reality now. Well, then you don't have to give in anymore to these earthly passions and desires that are basically consistent across all humanity. And so there's power there, but then Paul says, so now here's the thing. Once you start doing that, then you're going to start living this way instead of living that way. But when he gets to kind of the conclusion of all of that, what I was trying to connect us to Sunday was he says, now the greatest of all of these is love. These are all great, but at the end of the day, love is really what pushes you toward completion. It's what pushes you toward maturity.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. He kind of gives a laundry list, respectfully, of how you want to clothe yourself: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience.
Awesome. All of those.
Forgive one another.
Yes.
All that. But
incredible.
Over all these virtues,
put on love. That's right. And so the
which
power and the
binds
force
them
of
all
love.
together in perfect unity, which is that vocabulary I'm talking about.
Right.
That's so poetic and beautiful.
It is.
And
so that word love, though, is challenging for us.
But let's not forget how beautiful the scriptures are.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get so, cynical or just familiar that you don't forget how beautiful it is.
Yeah,
It's just
really
a beautiful
is.
piece of literature.
It is.
And more. Okay.
And the thing about love is, we throw the word around, like I mentioned Sunday morning, I love this, I love that.
Yeah, the N.T. Wright quote is pretty strong.
Yeah.
That somebody needs to sit down with love, the English word love, and let it delegate, something like that. He says it better than I.
Yeah.
But,
because you think about it, and you know that you mean something different when you say it.
Yeah, context
but we're
helps
limited
people.
by that word, and we just throw that word around so much so that it
I love my kids.
Yes.
I love shopping.
Yes.
I love pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
I love being outside.
Yeah.
Those all
golf.
mean something different.
But yeah, and so it's kind of like one time Lee Trevino was a really funny golfer. He's a lot older now, but he's always been really quick-witted. And it bothers him that they compare contemporary golfers who don't win very much. They just make a lot of money and compare them to someone like Jack Nicklaus, who won 18 major golf tournaments that even Tiger Woods hasn't matched that. And I heard Trevino say one time he was sitting on the TV broadcast, and one of the broadcasters said, well, this guy right here is having a great season. And he used that word. And Trevino said, I'm sorry, he's having a great season. And the guy said, yeah, he's had like 3 top 10s and he's made, how many ever $1 million. And Trevino said, so he hasn't won a golf tournament. And the guy said, but no, he said, well, then don't use the word great. He said, Jack Nicklaus was great. Pick another word for this guy. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not great. And I remember hearing that thinking, well, that's because our language sometimes is limited.
Yes.
The Greek language is more robust than ours. And so that's good for us. I think that's one of the reasons the New Testament was written in Greek, because it has a broader vocabulary. So with the word love, the Greeks had options, and the one that Paul chose here is the word agape. Now in the Greek world, there were times when that word also was used in ways that were had to be contextualized, but the New Testament writers took it and elevated it.
So that word existed in culture.
It did, yeah.
And it was used as love.
Right, but it had kind of a stronger feel to it than the other words for love. That was already true. It already had kind of a sense
rich and robust
of depth to it.
Okay.
But the New Testament writers chose that word and decided, okay, this is the highest bar. This is God's kind of love. So philia in Greek means love or affection.
Yeah. Okay.
If I were going to say as your pastor that I loved you in Greek, that's the word I would use. It's a familial,
and that'd be appropriate,
gracious kind of word of affection. There's the word eros, which is sensual kind of love that should exist between a husband and a wife. That's the most common word for love in the Greek language. Interestingly enough, it's never found in the New Testament. But then the word agape is the New Testament writers took that word and said, okay, we're going to give this word, this is the highest love there is. And it has a sense of just God's, just the way he chooses to love us, which is not really dictated by what we do or who we are. It says more about who he is. So then Paul says, now, above everything else, put that on. Put the kind of love that God has for us, wrap your life in that. And then all these other virtues will really, really become much deeper and richer if you do that. Because without that, that's why I chose to read 1 Corinthians 13 at the end of my sermon, where Paul says, if you don't have that, it just so degrades anything else you have. You can do so many things. But if you don't have love, even if you do them, but if you don't do them in love, it's just empty, like
and
the
scriptures talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of Jesus talks about that.
Yeah.
You just taught on Matthew with the Pharisees. They can look good, but they're like whitewashed tombs.
Just empty.
Yeah. And when we talk about character and virtue, it's really about the inward, right? It's about the love overflows from your inward character.
Correct.
Because which in us is shaped by Christ.
Right.
It's not just being good on your own.
Right.
But,
I mean, it's good on its own. Aristotle talked about virtues, and to him, living a virtuous life was good for you.
But
it helps you be a better person.
An end to itself.
Correct.
Or at least the origin of it was maybe from itself.
Yeah. You end up flourishing is what he would say. And that's the end.
If you're good.
But we're hungry.
That doesn't satisfy you?
No, there's something deeper going on with us.
Okay.
And to me, that's what I tried to capture Sunday morning, this idea that human beings, just designed by God uniquely, there's this consciousness that we have, this self-awareness, this the image of God in us, and that's what's being restored by the power of the gospel in our lives. And then that's what enables us to connect with God, and then that's what enables us to love. And so I also quoted Patrick Mitchell from his book, The Message of Love.
Before we hit end, I want to talk about Patrick Mitchell. Can we shift to that?
Yes.
I know you quoted him on Sunday.
Yes.
But he was in town, in the U.S.
Yes.
And we kind of said, hey, can you come by us for a bit? And so he spent Tuesday morning with our leadership staff.
Yes.
So most of our ministers.
Great guy.
And
Yeah, he found us back in 2020 during the pandemic. we were studying love, and I'm pretty sure it was Todd Steele that recommended to me this book, The Message of Love, by Patrick Mitchell. And so I ordered it, started reading it. Well, I just, if I can say, I loved it.
Yeah. He would like that.
It's just really good.
Yeah.
And so I began quoting him, and his wife somehow, I don't know how this happened, but they live in Ireland. He's a professor at the Irish Bible Institute in Dublin. She discovered this, so he writes me kind of out of the blue.
So you didn't reach out to him
he reached
and
out to
say,
me.
your book has been helpful to me.
Right. No, I did not. I didn't. He wrote me and said, hey, my wife and I have found you.
And you're quoting me.
Yeah, and you're quoting me is what he said. And my wife thinks this is awesome. And I'm just humbled that you're doing this. Well, then, of course, I was humbled that this professor of theology who I don't know.
Right.
So I write him back, and I just said, well, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I'm very honored that you would even know anything I'm doing or saying. I'm just a Baptist preacher over here in America trying to figure this thing out. And well, then he writes me again, and the next thing you know, we're back and forth, and now they're regular worshipers with us. And he, all along now for the last 5 years, he'll write me and say, hey, what a great sermon today, da-da-da-da-da. And if I ever mention anything out of his world, he always responds. Like, you may remember that town Londonderry, that bridge, the Peace Bridge. Yeah. So he wrote me that afternoon.
A couple months ago, you preached it. That was
it's in Ireland, and it's one side of the bridge is Protestant, the other side's Catholic, and but it's the same town. But the Catholics call the town one thing, and the Protestants call it another thing, and so now they've kind of just combined it all so that they can try to help everybody be happy. And so anyway, so I used that as an illustration. Well, that afternoon he wrote me and he said, "Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about this bridge and how it has helped," and which was so sweet, and just helping me even understand more deeply what was really going on there. Yeah. And so then he writes me again, kind of out of the blue, and says, hey, I'm going to be in the U.S. because the Irish Bible Institute has a nonprofit entity in the U.S. that supports it. And he said the board of directors of the school have asked him to come to the U.S. to visit the two places where their supporters live.
Chicago and Denver. Is that right?
And he said, because Dallas is such a great option in terms of flights, I would love to fly home from Dallas, from DFW, and I think there's a direct flight to Dublin. I think is what he told me. He said, so would it be okay if maybe the night before, perhaps I might come to Arlington and at least see you all?
Yep.
And, which I immediately wrote back and said, yes, we would love that.
Such a gentle request.
Yes, and he said, well, I don't need anything. I don't want, I'm not asking for... I would just like to meet you face to face after all these years of watching you and my wife, enjoying your church. And so then I said, well, here's something interesting to me. You've lived your entire life in Ireland as a minister. He's been a pastor, a church planter, professor of theology, training missionaries, training pastors. And if you know anything about Ireland, you know that Ireland has now separated into two nations. The Northern Ireland is its own country now, and the Republic of Ireland.
And just in general, that's not always peaceful historically when countries separate.
Yes.
It's usually not.
Yes. They went through like a 30-year time of violence, and some of it was, we always had it portrayed to us in the U.S. as Catholic and Protestant, but it's way deeper.
It's very political.
So much more going on there. But he has lived a good bit of his life in that polarized culture, trying to do church, train church leaders. And so I just said to him, well, hey, let me ask you a question. You're going to be here. This is a part of your story. We live in somewhat of a polarized culture. It's a little bit different, but we live in one, and we're trying to navigate it. Would you be willing to come speak to our staff to just talk to us about how that has worked? And he's, as you know, he's so humble and so gentle, kind of a quiet scholar, really.
Oh, and, so gentle to be with. Yeah.
And so he agreed to. He was so honored. He just even we took him to dinner on Monday night.
Humble strength. Yeah.
And he was just like, "Are you sure that you want me?" He said, "I can just do like a 5-minute introduction." I said, "Patrick, no, you."
The whole meeting is for you. We already called it.
This is yours. And so
even when he was with us. Tuesday morning, I was like, I'll just do like a 15-minute.
Yeah.
And you were like, no, you got the whole time.
That's right.
Yeah. It was just really great. I thought, my perspective. And I think everybody in the room was just right there with him.
But he talked about how
Well, the funny thing was he did not talk about the theology of love.
No.
I mean, that's not why you had him.
No.
You know, we know that's there. We referenced the book. I mean, I took a few quotes from it, but you had him talk about really the mission, just the mission in this current post-Christendom era.
And how we're trying to navigate sharing the gospel, living the gospel, being gospel people in the face of very challenging circumstances. And that's where he lives and just did a splendid job with us. All it did to me was even all the more drive me back into his book. I've already been looking back through it just because there's just so many good things there. Now that I know him, I mean, you know, I've met him and I can hear his voice.
Think you know him. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's a 5-year relationship, but now it's face to face.
Yeah.
There's spiritual metaphor to that too, right?
Yeah.
Something,
that's right.
right?
There's something about that. And it's really good. So to me, I think it's beautiful.
I took a screenshot. He had a great PowerPoint in terms of content. I mean, it was like 6-8 slides, but every slide I was just like, jotting down everything.
Is really good.
Yeah, he had a good parsing out of culture.
Yeah.
Of
everything he shared, you would go, this is really good.
I know, and I just really, I mean, I was switching back and forth between pages on my iPad because I took good notes.
And the staff was energized. Lots of questions.
Well, he set it up well. He did a quick PowerPoint that hit on a ton.
Yes.
And then said, well, what do y'all want to know more about?
Right.
Which the whole room was like, this. What about this? What do you think about that? You know, and
good
questions too.
I loved his demeanor.
But our staff, I was proud of them too. Yeah. Not that, I mean, I'm one of them, but none of the questions were silly or off-putting or they're all really thoughtful. Yeah. Like even Ashley being like, how can we pray for the Irish church? Right. You know, just thinking about this, this mutuality between us. Yeah.
And he told, you know, the night before, he's so self-deprecating. It's just funny. Yeah. So we were talking at dinner on Monday night, and he said, well, just listening to your sermons, I know you love golf. And I said, I do. And he said, well, you know, I mean, Rory McIlroy, of course, is our favored son here in Ireland. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you know, what's interesting is, I said, well, do you like Rory? And he said, oh, do I like Rory? He said,
the wrong question, though. Turns out,
favorite.
Do you know Rory?
And then he said, well, actually, believe it or not, he and I are from the same hometown in Hollywood. I belong to that same golf club. I know his parents. He said his dad, I played golf with his dad for years, and we watched his dad work 3 jobs so that Rory could play in these tournaments. And he said, we all knew. He said, you would see Rory go play in a little tournament. And he said, you know, he was a teenager and he was beating everybody in the club. Nobody could, you're thinking, this young man is a phenomenon. He said, but because they were not well-to-do people, you know, to get Rory into these places where he actually would have an opportunity to be a golfer. He said his dad's working at the golf course. He was working this other job. He worked nights as a bartender. He started telling us all this stuff, and he's calling him by name. You know,
because he's his friend.
Yes, his friend. He's like,
Mr.
whatever. So, but he was so humble about it, you know, and he said, I don't know if that interests you or not. Of course, Cindy's over there going, you have no idea.
Even, you know, we had to, and I always appreciate this, but we said, you know, if you have a critique of our culture, a critique, you know, you're outside looking in, what's your critique of American Christianity? Or if you have a challenge for us, and he just wouldn't really.
He wouldn't. He's like, I'm
not
one to
have
do
a
that.
word to us, which I think is very wise. And we eventually got a little bit goodie out of it. But his whole posture was extremely humble.
Very sweet.
You don't know that you're sitting next to, you know, a giant, which I always appreciate.
I do
That's
too.
You want more of that.
Yep.
People who need to toot their own horn.
Yep.
You don't need much of that at all.
Exactly.
So I ordered a book that he referenced, which Luke has probably referenced it before too, because I've heard some. The language sounded familiar enough to me, but it's very interesting, especially the way that he said he was using it. The one about understanding your culture. I have my notes.
Smith, right? No.
Yeah, J.K. Smith.
J.K.
Smith's called We Are What We Love, but he talked about the theology of the shopping mall, which I find to be, you know,
fascinating.
Listening. How to read secular liturgies is the I look through the table of contents. That's a chapter
that's about,
and I'm like,
interesting.
Yeah, you know, what is the advertisement saying to you? Just this consumeristic God that we have. I just found it all very relevant, and I was like, I want to read more about that. I want to think about that more.
Well, when he told us that one of the things he does to his undergraduates in that course,
send them shopping.
He makes them go shopping and come back to the class and bring what they bought. And then let him tell the class why they bought that and what it makes them believe about themselves. Yeah. Kind of a lesson on consumerism.
And I said,
really
tell me more about that.
Tell
me more about that. And it is. And it's very much the air that we breathe, the water we swim in, that we forget.
Really good.
Like an advertisement. I remember when advertisements switched, and I've read a little bit about this, from kind of trying to sell you on the product that it has. And now, like an Apple commercial never actually shows the product. It shows a lifestyle.
Yeah.
They're trying to sell you on a lifestyle.
about
Nike
you.
made that switch.
That's right.
Yeah, it has nothing to do, like the old commercials that were like, I'm a Mac and I'm a Microsoft. What is it? I'm a Mac and I'm a Windows.
Yeah.
And it's like the pleated pants old guy and the cool hip guy. Well, they're not holding their computers. They're selling you a lifestyle and a brand. And it's like, you want to be this.
That's right.
And if you wear this perfume, you are this. And, that's a whole shift. And
Fascinating.
who you want to
and
be.
his take on it was awesome. So
so more of that.
And the fact that he said that series of books on theology kind of issues in the New Testament, and his major professor are having coffee together, and he just says to him, you've got like 8 volumes and there's not one on love. That's interesting. And the guy says, why don't you write one, Patrick? Classic.
It's like when I ask you why women don't preach at First Baptist Arlington.
So anyway, it was really good. So this coming Sunday, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the take off, put on, that imagery that's found in Colossians 3.
There's a lot to talk about there.
And I want to connect it to our high school grads as they're going to enter into this new world for themselves, and just think about how much focus there is on fashion design. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about, God being the original fashion designer. So
How can it not?
Yeah. So looking forward to it.
Well, there's a lot of good right now, good in the biblical sense going on around us. And so I want y'all to be a part of it. I don't want us to miss it. I don't want to miss it. And so let's just make sure we're catching what God's doing at First Baptist Arlington and be part of it.
Amen.
See y'all next week with Luke. Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.